Now let's pick up Luke's account of the arrest. Verse 45, when he rose up from prayer and was come to his disciples, he found them sleeping for sorrow, and said unto them, why sleep ye? Rise and pray, lest ye enter into temptation. And then verse 47 tells you, while he yet spake, behold, a multitude, and he that was called Judas, one of the 12, went before them and drew near unto Jesus to kiss him. So in Luke's account, he only wakes them up once. In Matthew's account, he goes out and finds Peter, James, and John sleeping 3 different times and wakes them up each time, and then goes back into the garden. And now Judas comes into Gethsemane. You'll remember that earlier in this year, we talked about this concept of Christology, which is a study of the person, the man, the mission of Jesus Christ. Who was he? And a high Christology emphasizes the divine, the godly, the miraculous attributes of Jesus Christ. A low Christology emphasizes the human, the mortal, the earthly aspects of Christ's life and his ministry. John's gospel, as we've mentioned clear back in January, is the highest Christological perspective of the 4 gospel writers. If you were to read all of John's 21 chapters in one sitting and ask yourself, where is John portraying the divinity of Christ and where is he showing more of the humanity? You're going to find elements of both, but it's much more emphasized on this high Christology. In verse 1, it says, when Jesus had spoken these words, which is the intercessory prayer from John 17, he went forth with his disciples over the brook Kedron, where was a garden, into the which he entered and his disciples. So we combine the word garden here with Gethsemane from Matthew's account, and we often refer to it all as the Garden of Gethsemane. And he's got his disciples with him. And look at verse 2. And Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Jesus oft times resorted thither with his disciples. In other words, Judas has spent many a night in Gethsemane with the apostles and with Jesus, and he knows where to find him when he brings this band of men with him. And verse 3 says, Judas then, having received a band of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, and they came thither with lanterns and torches and weapons. Fascinating. I believe it was Elder Maxwell who once said, they're so spiritually blind that they need lanterns and torches in order to see the light of the world on that dark night. And Jesus, verse 4, therefore, knowing all things that should come upon him, went forth and said unto them, whom seek ye?
Yeah, he's not afraid. He's not cowering back. He knows what's going to go on. He just shows up. And I even think about the way John does this, that he's focusing on these core attributes, these divine qualities of Jesus. And we shouldn't feel like, gosh, John, you should have also told us what Matthew and Mark told us. Instead, what we get is a fuller view. It's just like if a friend told another friend about you versus maybe a child or a parent said something about you, you're still the same person, but the emphasis may be different and people might get a different perspective. For example, my kids have a certain view of who I am, and people at work see me in a different way, and people who meet me out in public, it's different. And I feel the glory that we have someone like John who's so motivated in his testimony to witness of the divinity of Jesus that he would shine the spotlight on the light of the world. And yet we also have Luke and Matthew and Mark who are willing to talk more about the humanity, that we get the fuller picture because of these 4 good and what I would say faithful witnesses of Jesus Christ.
It's fascinating from John's perspective, the crowd's standing there. And the implication from the synoptics account is that Judas has already given the sign, and the band of men with their lanterns and torches and weapons are standing there and nobody's moving. And Jesus steps forward and says, whom seek ye? And look at their response. This is beautiful. Verse 5, they answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus saith unto them, I am he. Can I suggest to you that, once again, This is one of those places where the King James translators italicized words that they're adding of their own accord, that they're not translating those words. This word he is italicized because it's not in any of the Greek manuscripts that they're using to make their translation. What he said in the Greek was ego eimi. Now, he's not speaking Greek. He would be speaking Aramaic, but in this context, the ego eimi in Greek implies that he just used the unspeakable name of God from the Old Testament, from the burning bush, speaking to Moses. Who should I tell them sent me? I am. Ego eimi. It's the great I am, or the Yahweh of the Old Testament.
Well, because he's speaking in Aramaic, he likely is using a variant of what Moses would have heard from God in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14, which is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. And so Aramaic is not that different. So he would have been saying something like this, and that's what gets some of the Jewish leaders so mad.
Ooh. So did you catch the significance here? His question was, whom seek ye? They said, we seek Jesus of Nazareth. And his answer isn't, oh, I am he, I am Jesus of Nazareth. He said, what comes to us in the Greek, ego eimi, which is Yahweh, Jehovah, the great I am. You're seeking Jesus of Nazareth, ego eimi. Jesus of Nazareth is Jehovah of the Old Testament, is this implication here. Now keep in mind, which group in this garden that night with the moon somewhere, full moon overhead somewhere, middle of the night here, which group is armed? It says, verse 6, as soon as he had said unto them, I am, they went backward and fell to the ground.
Again, the sign of his power and divinity, and these humans have really nothing that they can do against him. I mean, even consider that he knows everything. He doesn't even need to wait for Judas to betray him. He already knows this happened. He doesn't need to wait for that kiss.
If you picture this, geographically speaking, the Mount of Olives would be going up behind us here, as you picture this, to the top, and Gethsemane's down here at the base of the Mount of Olives. And then you get the Kidron Brook, and then you get a steep slope up to Temple Mount to the west. These people came from Jerusalem, so they would have come either down or up the Kidron Valley here. Now they're coming up into the garden to arrest Jesus. So they're looking up at him, and he says, ego eimi, or Yahweh. They fall backwards to the ground, looking at him, and so Jesus has to step forward again. Then asked he them again, whom seek ye? And now they're on the ground. We seek Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus answered, I have told you that I am. And once again, the word he is italicized. You can cross it out, and it makes more sense doctrinally. If therefore ye seek me, let these go their way. Now, can you picture this moment? It's dark. I mean, you've got a full moon overhead, but it's night. They're on the ground. They're looking at him. They've got the torches. You can almost hear the flickering of the flames in your imagination as they're looking at him. Have you ever wondered why they fell backwards to the ground? Is it just because of what he said? Or is it because of how he said it? Can I suggest to you that this world has never known the kind of majesty and power that exuded from Jesus on that occasion, in that garden, on that night? He just completed the first phase of the infinite agonies of his atonement in our behalf. And he's now risen from the ground in that now come to meet them, having bled from every pore. I'm suggesting to you that the people, when they come, they thought they were coming to arrest a man named Jesus of Nazareth. And now they've seen the sign given by Judas, if you use the synoptic accounts, the kiss, and they didn't do anything. Jesus has come forward and asked them, and they feel a majesty that they can't describe that sent them backward to the ground. And now he's asked them again, and they're still not moving. And can you picture this moment of stillness, of quietness on that night? And Peter is standing there thinking, aha, this is my moment. Because earlier in one of the synoptic accounts, we're told that they brought 2 swords with them to the garden that night. So Peter, shing, pulls out the sword. And
which, by the way, it's actually a short sword. It's like a stabbing knife. It might be about this big. Not particularly big. He's a fisherman.
So Peter rushes forward, and we're told, verse 10, then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and smote the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Now, this is fascinating because all 4 gospel writers refer to somebody getting their ear cut off that night in Gethsemane. Only John gives you his name, Malchus, and tells you it's Malchus's right ear that got cut off by Peter. There's only one gospel writer who's going to mention that the ear actually ended up getting healed by Jesus. Can any of you guess which gospel writer, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, would talk about the healing of Malchus's ear? If you guessed Luke the physician, you're right. It's only in Luke's gospel where the ear gets healed. And it's only in John's gospel here where we get his name. Again, we've talked about this in previous episodes. I think it's significant that we know this man's name. It's not just a soldier or a random guy in this band of men. And his name was Malchus. To me, implies that when John's writing his gospel, whenever that is, John knows exactly who it is, and he gives us his name, and none of the other gospel writers do. So John and his audience seem to know the name Malchus. I'll tell you what I'm holding out hope for. I'm holding out hope that Jesus healed more than Malchus's ear that night. I'm holding out hope that when Jesus touched that ear and put it back on his head, that he felt something deep in his heart, that this becomes a converting, fully turning point for Malchus. Can you imagine this moment, though? You've got a whole band of men armed, and they're backwards on the ground, and Peter pulls this sword and cuts one of your comrades' ears off. What would you expect from any one of that group of men that are armed to do? You would expect the next verse to say, and they all ganged up on Peter and killed him for attacking their buddy in arms, their brother there. Do any of you find it interesting that there's only one person who comes to Malchus's defense that night in Gethsemane? Only one. And it's none of his quote-unquote friends or comrades. It just so happens to be the person that Malchus came to arrest and to haul off to be judged and condemned. It's Jesus who steps forward and stops Peter. And he says, "Put up thy sword into the sheath. The cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink it?" And he submits. And so now what happens is the soldiers eventually get up the courage, apparently, to arrest him. And the apostles all flee. They abandon him.